Welcome back to the Only Swans Podcast, the most irregular Swansea City podcast you could ever look to listen to. But we are back for the new season and we are very, very excited. Carwyn, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. How are you, Ollie?
Yeah, not bad, not bad. I think, excited for it all to get underway again now. Obviously, we've already had the League Cup, but things I think are going to be a little bit different going forward on this podcast. It might not just be our mugs that you're seeing in future. It might have a few different faces on you. We're going to record this online now, mainly because we are lazy and don't enjoy setting up the equipment. I'm sure you can agree with that one.
I quite like setting up the equipment. Actually, I just think it's quite awkward, especially with you living in. We can say you lived in Cardiff this year now, can't
We
we?
can say
Surely,
that now, yeah.
yeah. It was quite awkward to come back, arrange a time, whether that be in Mumbles Coffee or the Swansea Jack. So doing it online is a bit more fitting, and we did always try our best to film in person because we had this sort of idea in our heads that we always wanted it to look
Yeah.
a certain way. But at the end of the day, we both have good webcams, good mics, so it can look just as good online as it does in person, really.
Exactly. Yeah. And as I say, I think it'll allow us an opportunity to bring a few new faces in, hopefully, as well. And I'm sure we'll still film the odd episode in person if we have big scoops and things like that. So I suppose we should start by talking about the new season. How are you feeling?
I'm very confident. I mean, yeah, I think I've seen maybe a little bit of overconfidence online, but you always do, don't you? We've made some fantastic signings, some pretty decent sales. I think we probably start off with Stephen Welsh. I mean, what do you think of that signing? I think that a fairly decent signing.
I mean, I liked what I saw from Welsh at Motherwell last season. I mean,
Mhm.
obviously that's a club we will talk about again in a few minutes, I'm sure. But he's got a bit of the Harry Darling about him. Is probably
Yeah.
the best thing I can say. Defensively, I don't think he's probably as strong as Cabango. I mean, I was going to say as strong as Burgess as well, but defensively, even there, he's looked, a bit suspect so far. And obviously, I'm sure we'll come on to talk about him. But Welsh is a really good passer. I don't think he's the tallest. He's not the strongest in the air, but as a sort of complement for Cabango, I think he might be quite good.
And I think he's in for, an instant opportunity with the unfortunate injury of Burgess at the weekend against Birmingham City.
Yeah, it looks like a bad one, that, doesn't it?
Mhm.
It sounds like he may well have ruptured his Achilles, which obviously that's the same injury as Josh Ginnelly had a couple of years ago. He never really came back from that, and obviously it is a bit worrying to see someone over 30 sustain that injury. I mean, I've seen some quite bizarre discourse online of people celebrating his injury, which I think is mental, like on a human level.
Yeah.
You know, guy is not going to be able to
There's
walk for however long
I
now.
think it's the summary of sort of online football fandom, isn't it? It's like you
Yeah,
don't like a player, so you celebrate the injury, which is, potentially career ending for all we know. It could well be.
yeah,
We've seen many players never recover from that injury, including, as you
no,
said there, Josh
exactly.
Ginnelly. Um, and
Last
I
seen in
think
Azerbaijan.
I think it is awkward in it because you'd imagine now we have a hole to fill really because Welsh
Mm.
was meant to be the sort of backup defender who would come in if and when, but now he's gonna be that starter, and if it is an Achilles injury, you'd imagine that we do have a hole to fill there.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that probably the most sensible thing to do is bring in a centre back on loan. Then, isn't it?
Yeah,
We probably didn't expect to be in the market for another centre back. We've got Lissa who we can play there. I mean, you can make an argument that perhaps bringing a right back in would make a bit more sense and just move Lissa to centre back full time. Whether physically he's ready to play every week at centre back in the league, I'm not 100% sure. I mean, talent wise, I think he's up to it, and I'm sure we'll see a lot going forward from him this season. Welsh is obviously a sort of more cultured centre back. Perhaps we need a left footer.
yeah,
I think would
mhm,
make a bit of sense because that's Burgess's biggest attribute in many ways, isn't it?
yeah, yeah. No, I agree.
And I think, yeah, I think on loan as the window goes on, Premier League Two club or Premier League clubs are willing to send their PL2 players out on loan or other players out on their second loan, and those players tend to become available. So perhaps we'll see some
Mhm.
movement there.
Well,
I
you want
reckon.
sort of a Galen Casey archetype of person, don't you? Really,
Probably
ideally
like a
one that
little bit
won't be
better.
recalled. I didn't think he was too bad. Not not
I
that
mean the
that's
two that
relevant to
kind
our
of
current discussion.
the two that kind of spring to mind for me are both Man City youngsters, and they both spent time at Watford last season, which is Max Lane, which I think would be a pretty spectacular loan signing,
Yeah.
and who we were linked with earlier in the summer, and definitely were sniffing around. And Mfuni, who was also at Watford in the back half of last
Mm.
season. He's someone else I really like. That type of young loanee, I think, would make a bit of sense, really.
Yeah,
The
absolutely.
second signing we made this summer was Musa Yo. Where do you stand on him so far?
Well, obviously he looks absolutely rapid, and he did work with Matos at Salzburg, so there's kind of the link there. Obviously, we broke the story, which is always pretty nice, isn't it? I
It
saw you
was,
posting
yeah.
that straight on LinkedIn.
I did, yeah.
Absolutely dying for it. But yeah, it just feels like a bit of a coup. I think he's a very talented player. Yeah, I think we've signed some brilliant wingers this window, to be honest.
Yeah, I really like what I saw of him in that Birmingham game. I think he was probably the player that impressed me more than anyone else, just because of the three. I mean, I'm going to call just a wide player for the sake of this, but of
Yeah.
the three wide players we've signed, he was the one I was probably most unsure about.
Mm,
And in that Birmingham game, I was really, really impressed by him. He works really hard. There was one moment he gave the ball away in the middle of the pitch, and you think, oh gosh, we've seen this from our wingers before.
yeah.
He was straight back, and he was the one who made up for it with a really good
Mhm.
tackle on the edge of our own box. So, works really hard. It brings genuine pace to the team, which is something we don't have. And I think, yeah, I like what I see of him so far. I mean, I suppose we should go on to talk about the other two wingers we brought in, and probably our most exciting signing so far is Eli Just. Where would you say you stand on him? Also from Motherwell.
I mean, of course, we've all seen him in the World Cup. 3 World Cup goals for New Zealand, the only goal scorer for New Zealand. Every fan up in Scotland I've spoke to has described him as one of, if not the best player in the league last season, which is,
I'd say so. Yeah.
an absolutely ridiculous signing. There were so many teams sniffing around for him. Of course, they would be after that World Cup. Um, a star in that Motherwell side last season, and to be honest, it does feel like a big, big signing. To be honest,
Yeah, I agree. And a Motherwell side that played some brilliant football as well.
yeah,
So I think in terms of coming in, hopefully we'll have a lot of the ball this season, a bit more than we perhaps did under Matos last season. I know that's a source of debate. I think we probably will look to keep possession a little bit more. We saw that against Leganes especially. And he is used to playing in that system, and he's versatile as well. I mean, he's able to play through the middle as a sort of attacking midfielder, or he can play out wide. And I think
hmm
having that versatility is another big asset for us. I mean, he's already come close to scoring 2 goals. I think he needs to sort of get on the score sheet soon, but I'm
break the
sure he will.
deadlock. Yeah, you can imagine
Yeah.
that we'll probably play him in both positions really. Sometimes in the middle, sometimes out wide, depending on whether we are playing Apoku and Yao or we're playing him.
Yeah, because I mean, we can't expect Apoku and Yo to play 46 games this season out wide. And if we were looking at wide options, I would much rather see Just play out wide than any of the other options who still remain. And I'm sure
Yeah.
we'll come in Outgoings. I'm sure we'll come on to talk about
Mhm.
them.
Yeah, we'll
Hey,
talk about Opoku. That's the final winger. What have you made of him so far, and what do you think of him as just a general signing?
yeah, look, he came in from Zulte Waregem with some really exciting numbers last season. Looks like someone
Mhm.
who is going to be a bit of an output merchant. My sense is he may drift through games slightly. I'm
Yeah.
hoping we see, plenty of goals and assists, but whether he always looks, like the best in open play, I'm not 100% sure. But from what it looks like, he does seem to have a bit of a knack of getting into good positions and things like that, which is fine. I just don't think he'll necessarily be as much of a hard worker and as much of a sort of touchline winger as Yo in some ways. I think Yo might be quite a useful outball quite often just because of
Yeah.
how quick he is, whereas I don't see a Poku so much as that. But I think he could easily end the season with a few goals and a few
Yeah.
assists.
I mean, he looks like the first real proper Jamestown signing, doesn't he? If anything, I'd suggest, he is very much a signing made off of data because I'd assume not many people had even heard of,
No, I hadn't. I mean,
Belgian side.
I saw a lot of people describing Eli Just as a Jamestown signing, which I mean, we'd all heard of him. We all,
Yeah.
saw him at the World Cup. I'm not sure. I mean, I know the sort of precluding factor isn't we'd heard of him for Jamestown, but I
Yeah.
think he's one of those where a scout has gone, he looks really good, and bring him in. Whereas I'm sure Apoku was a bit more of a data signing.
And the penultimate signing of the window so far is, of course, Parente from Benfica. In an ideal world, as we've said in the past about Ishe Samuel Smith, he never plays because, of course, Josh Tymon is the best fullback in the league. Team of the season last season, goal of the season in the EFL last season. We all know how good he is. Not just we aren't talking about Josh Tymon as this defensive monster, but we're talking about his attacking output and what he offers further up the field. And without him on the pitch, there have been many times, especially last season, where we probably would have looked very lost going forward.
Yeah, I mean, he was our most creative player last season. To have your most creative player as a left back in a back four kind of says two things. A, he's a very advanced and advanced in terms of his position up the pitch, but also important cog within the setup of the team. It also says to me that the wingers and the attacking midfielders aren't doing anywhere near enough.
Yeah.
Which is obviously something we've looked to address this
Mm-hmm.
summer. I mean, he has an unbelievable delivery. He isn't as defensively suspect as I think some people like to make out. Like, obviously, we have Josh Key on the other side often as well. I think Tymon is a much superior defender to Key. He's brilliant going forward. He can take a man on, but it's that crossing is the best.
I think there's this sort of modern day thing now when a fullback is so good attacking. You look at like Trent further up, right? Like they are made out to be truly the worst defender ever because they are just so good going forward. I think they can't be like ridiculously good at one and just average at the other almost.
Well, it's like that. I think it might have been Dean Saunders who said it once about Wan-Bissaka, where he said he can't defend. It's like people just automatically seem top level fullbacks. I'm talking Wan-Bissaka from his Palace days now. And go, well, they can't defend because they're a top fullback. It's like, well, no, if they couldn't defend, they wouldn't be playing at fullback.
And
like, there's a reason.
Wan-Bissaka's the worst decision because I think he's a brilliant defender anyway, isn't he?
Yeah, that's literally he can't attack is Wan-Bissaka's problem. That was what made that thing so funny. But I think there is a bit of sort of lazy talk around time, and I think signing him up to a new contract was a masterstroke. I mean, there was a lot of the sort of Ryan Manning sort of syndrome almost. It felt like we're going to lose Tymon on a free, and we're not going to be able to replace him, or we will have to, hope that we get it right, like we did with him when we lost Manning. Obviously, we signed him up to that new contract. And I still think he goes under the radar as to how good he is.
Yeah, I'd say it's one of the signings of the summer, really, that new contract. I mean, he is so important to this team. And as I said, I think he's the best fullback in the league. Easy. But yeah, very good. Final signing, of course, Ross Stewart. Ross Stewart is a player that I've sort of looked to for years. And, I think he's been very unfortunate throughout his career that he literally just can't stay fit. But if you can keep him fit, then you are absolutely laughing. As we've got 9 goals in the Championship last season. Even in his Sunderland days, he looked excellent. What have you made so far? What do you think of that signing?
I mean, 9 goals in the Championship last season in only 12 starts as well. He's another striker at this club with a ridiculously good minutes to goal ratio. We now have 3 who are in the hundreds in terms of minutes per goal, which is a pretty nice problem to have. I mean, my worry is how we're going to fit all 3 of Ida, Zambotnik and Stewart in the team. I mean, I don't see them being able to play together. I mean, the risk you always take with Ross Stewart is he going to be fit? Which, to be honest, the assumption over the past few years has kind of been no. His first 2 seasons at Southampton, he barely played. Last season, he obviously was able to string it all together a little bit more. But injuries are always in the back of your mind. And if we do lose Zambotnik, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a minute, then Ida doesn't exactly have the greatest injury record.
That's what I was going to say. I do find it almost slightly strange in a way, just by the fact that, as you say, we'll have 2 very injury-prone strikers. Unless, Zambotnik isn't shy to an injury either, really. We've seen many times.
Yeah, so sounds like he had a knock in pre-season. We don't really know, but we'll take the club at their word for that one.
Yeah.
But I think Ida is obviously somebody who is going to drop deep a little bit more. We saw that against Birmingham. I think Stewart is more of a sort of classic old school striker, just wants to get in the box and finish chances and will. I mean, that's not to say he's not a brilliant footballer. I think he is. And if he stays fit, he can be a real asset for us. I think the 3-year contract is a little bit of a risk for a guy who's that
Yeah.
injured and over 30. But I imagine that's the only reason we've signed him, is
Yeah,
because we were
he's
willing to
just a
offer him that
he's
3-year
just a
deal.
utility up top, and I mean, you bring him on the pitch, and he's got a very good goal scoring range. I would argue. I mean, he can score from the edge of the box. He can score inside the box. He is just a brilliant finisher, and I think it's a really good signing. It's one that I've always looked at him and thought, he's a brilliant player, and of course,
Yeah.
it's all down to whether you can keep him fit or not, as we've said.
And it's not the first time we've been linked with him. I remember we were
Yeah,
linked with him about 5 years ago when he was at Sunderland, and we were all really, really excited then because that was sort of pre-injuries,
yeah,
and he was a brilliant player. What is a relief is he's had these injuries, played a lot of football last season, so hopefully he's coming out the other side and still
yeah,
looks like a brilliant player.
absolutely.
But the question is, do we keep Zambotnik beyond this summer? And where do you stand on that? I mean, we should say we're recording this on Tuesday. Yesterday, Hull had a bid turned down for Zambotnik. As we understand it, that was the first bid we've received from him in this window. There has been other interest from Coventry and Sporting Lisbon, but I think that was the first concrete bid,
Yeah.
and it feels like it won't be the last.
Yeah, you'd assume so. I mean, it's awkward. Again, we've seen, a ridiculous amount of discourse on Twitter regarding what should be done. Um, and you'd assume like there's been a lot of discussion regarding the fact that we potentially couldn't get the value we want for him. And I can see that, if I'm being honest, I don't think, say, the championship top scorer would usually head to the Premier League in many scenarios.
Yeah.
But I don't think Zambotnik, despite being without a doubt one of the best finishers I've ever seen, to be honest. I mean, both feet can score from absolutely anywhere. Outside of
I think
that,
that's fair.
he isn't the best presser. He isn't the best on the ball. He hasn't got the best passing range. Clubs aren't going to look at that as a desirable player, despite the fact that he is just a superb goal scorer. So they aren't willing to pay, I'd assume the club would want 20 million for him, maybe, which is awkward. I'd say we should want 20 million for him. Of course you should. He's the top scorer. As I said there, he's a brilliant finisher, and his value to us is so much. But is that value matched by the clubs, would you say? Probably not.
Yeah, I think it's quite an interesting one. I mean, you mentioned about the 20 million figure, which I think has to be the ballpark of what we're
Yeah.
looking to get for him. But we've seen, Will Lancashire sold this summer for a fee that could reach 20 million. I mean,
Yeah.
he'd have to be brilliant for that fee to reach it. But I know English tax is, of course, a thing. Did we see £20 million worth of play from Will Lancashire at Oxford
No.
last season? I don't think we did. Whereas we did see 26 goals. I mean, Jay Stansfield went for 20 million in League One, for
Yeah.
God's sake. I know, again, that's rising to 20 million. But this argument that we should, I saw Vital Swansea say on Twitter, we'd be lucky to get 12 for him.
12. Yeah.
Don't sell him then.
Yeah. No, I
If we,
agree with that. Unless we are getting the fee that suits us, there is no world where we should be saying, yeah, all right, send the top scorer off to wherever. These players
yeah,
are going for a lot of money. What is it, Shea Charles? Going for
for 30 million.
30
Yeah.
million. You'd think like, even if it's a package, like you'd imagine it'd be a package deal where it starts at 12 and could rise to 20. But even you'd argue that even that's better than straight up no more than 12 million championship top scorer, goodbye.
But we sold Joel Perot for 12 million,
Yeah.
who scored less goals than Zambotnik.
Mhm.
This was a few years ago. We sold him to a divisional rival where you'd assume there'd be some sort of premium. I understand that. Yeah, we sold him for 12 million. He scored less goals and he had a year left on his contract. We've signed Zambotnik up to a new contract until 2030.
Yeah.
I also don't necessarily buy this argument that he'd be an awful signing for Premier League teams. I mean, I don't think he'd be brilliant in the Premier League. Don't get me wrong.
No.
I don't think he's particularly quick enough for that league
Mhm.
necessarily. But he scored a lot of goals in a team that weren't very good at creating chances last season. The argument is people talk about him as if he was playing up front for the best team in the league. He wasn't. He had, let's be honest, probably the two worst starting wingers in the league outside of Sheffield
Yeah.
Wednesday creating chances for him. A left back, as we've already said, was our main creative outlet. He still scored 26 goals.
Mhm.
If we put ourselves in a position where we have to sell him this summer to fund our transfer activity, then there needs to be a review of what we're doing in our transfer activity, because you
Yeah.
just don't do
You can't
this.
plan to sell the top scorer, really. Yeah, I mean, we've already
Mm,
made one fairly big sale of, Ethan Galbraith, of course, which we'll come on to in a bit. But I do feel that, I as you said, that I think he would be, still a decent player in the Premier League. He doesn't really suit the league, of course. He suits maybe a sort of slower league. You'd argue, I've always said sort of Italian league along those
Yeah,
lines, maybe.
100%.
But,
I'm sure he scored both.
I think he'd be the best player of all time in the Italian league. But in the Premier League, he's a good goal scorer, as you've said. It's undeniable. He'd still probably get sort of 5-10 goals at a minimum, you'd argue.
I think one thing that was really interesting as well about Zambotnik's move to Hull potentially is that he's obviously been managed by Jurkovic before, so he knows exactly what he's going to get out of this guy, isn't it?
Yeah, and I find it very interesting with Hull. Their fans almost seem like they are above Zambotnik, better than Zambotnik. Like, he was the top scorer in the league they played in last season, in a league where...
Did you see... The Hull fan who said, "Why are we taking desperate punts?" And it's like, no, he was the league's top scorer. It's not a desperate punt.
Yeah, I saw this guy who was on TikTok saying we should go nowhere near it. I'd rather Oli McBurney up front. Now, obviously, I love Oli McBurney. You love Oli McBurney. But Zambotnik outscored Oli McBurney last season. So,
yeah,
I don't know. All of a sudden, they've gone to the Premier League. Of course, they have a lot of money. So, maybe
they've really
feel
not...
better.
They've not gone the way I thought they would in the Premier League. I thought they'd go mad like Sunderland and they'd spend the money quite horrendously, whereas they seem to be actually operating in quite a smart way. I mean, they picked up that Dahl from Cardiff, didn't they? That was he wasn't at Cardiff long, that guy. So
yeah, fair play. I mean, he lasted maybe 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, he was build a statue there, wasn't it? Him and Bale and Ramsey. Well, no, Ramsey did sign for them, didn't he? But you could easily forget that happened.
Bale the owner and Bale the player. So fair play to them. Fair play to them.
Our only competitive game so far has been Birmingham in the Cup. Obviously, a sort of weird bridge, really, between pre-season and the actual season starting. What did you make of our performance in that one?
Well, to start with, it felt a bit strange having a Carabao Cup game on a Saturday, didn't it?
I don't like it.
I hated that. It should be a Tuesday night, start the season off, whatever. No Saturday, God. But regardless, I think you could say it went how you would have expected, didn't it? I think there were a few encouraging signs there, as we said earlier. I think Yo looked really good. I think there were plenty of standouts in that game, but sort of a drab game, if anything. I thought we looked decent. We probably looked like the better side considering the result, I'd say. But I don't really care about the Carabao Cup, if I'm being completely honest. I know we've won it, and a lot of people love a little cup run, but I'd rather us compete in the FA Cup if we're going to compete in a cup.
We also had our sort of Carabao Cup run last season, didn't we?
Yeah.
I mean, we can't expect it every season.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it always comes as a bit of a sort of strange time because you obviously are waiting for people to fully get up to speed, waiting to fully build out your squad.
Yeah.
And you're already competing on two fronts, and that can always be a little bit bizarre this early in the season. For that, it is a competition I quite like. I quite enjoy the midweek Carabao Cup, watching, a sort of slightly rotated team go out there against some lower league opposition. What was annoying was we got drawn against a team in the same league, and because it was the week before the season started, everyone was always going to play their best teams.
Yeah. I think, except for last season, it always seems like we have terrible draws in the Carabao Cup. I don't know about you. We never get, an away we've never been to, or just a cool team at home, really. We always seem to
have like a ridiculous amount of home, like a ridiculous record of home draws.
It's always, it's always a team either in our league or, last season we did play sort of a Plymouth, or just like a mid-table Premier League club until, of course, Man City. But
yeah, that was a fun night under the lights, wasn't it?
But
I'm very proud of the way we played that night. That was a good game. I thought we did well. That was sort of almost like the highlight of Sheehan's permanent time here, which is a mad thing to say, and we lost 3-1.
I think it's the last time I've been impressed with Noosa as well, unfortunately.
I mean, we'll probably move on now to talk about Outgoings, and I think he's a brilliant name to bring up first. Really, I think his time at Swansea City is already at an end. Would you agree?
Yeah. Well, he's barely even played under Matos, really. His minutes have been so limited, and that's just as a result of just how injury prone he is. I think, he came in already being injury prone. I think we knew that. He'd had a major injury before he'd come to the club, hadn't he? But it's an awkward one because, fans do very much like Ganusa. I think he was one of our first sort of big signings of last season in which we'd
100%.
spent quite a bit of money. So people were really, it's a package deal that was meant to rise to almost 5 million quid or something like that, was it not?
Mm.
But yeah, I unfortunately just hasn't really worked out for him here, and I don't see why you would keep hold of him really. If it, we've already seen in one season just how unavailable he is, and even when he's available, I think if you start him, he looks knackered to start the second half. He can pretty much only play a half. So yeah, I think it's a sort of cut there for me.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, I've probably been less impressed with Anusa than most people. I
Mhm.
think he's, to be honest, I think he's nowhere near up to standard. I cannot work out how we spent £5 million on him, or a fee that
Plan
even
to.
potentially
Mhm.
rises to that. I've seen next to nothing from him. I think even that performance against Man City was slightly overblown. Has been sort of slightly elevated through sort of a passing of time. I really would love us to try and move him on this summer. I think it's not a signing that's worked out for any party. As far as we understand it, he was fit and available for Saturday, and he was left out the matchday squad.
Yeah,
And ultimately, that kind of says all you need to know. Because let's be honest, I don't really think much of Ronald and Om, who are the two options ahead of him.
yeah,
So if he's the third of those three, then that kind of says to me that he probably isn't up to scratch.
yeah. Absolutely. That is that's very worrying for him, isn't it?
Yeah, I think. I mean, those two as well are probably two I'd have quite liked to have seen us move on from this summer, but I can't see that happening now, if I'm
No.
honest.
I think you've got
I
to
mean,
imagine we at least keep hold of one because, of course,
yeah,
we made sort of the unexpected move. Yeah, I didn't really expect us to sell Cam Congreve, quite frankly. So you do imagine we kind of have to keep hold of at least one, if not two now. I would prefer it to be if we were going to keep hold of any of them.
if I'm honest, I'd probably prefer it to be Ronald out of
Really?
those two. Yeah, I think he offers a bit more as a sub because
Yeah, maybe.
at least he can come on, work hard, potentially help us see a game out. Whereas I don't really see what Arm offers at all. Really, I think we've seen 2 years of him now, and he's barely come on from where he was at the start of his Swans career. And I think we're going to lose him for 2 months of this season anyway,
Oh
with
yeah,
as a
the
result of the
Asian
Asian
Cup.
Games. And I
One thing I
think,
will say about our winger signings now in comparison to who our current wingers were, I've always said, just chatting to my friends and stuff, we sort of have this issue where even going back to your sort of Plachettas, right, where we seem to sign wingers with one fatal flaw. Usually it's end product. I think all of them do have an end product issue. Um,
yeah,
but it doesn't seem like these wingers, this new sort of crop of wingers, have that issue as such, where there's just one major flaw to their game that we can't
mm.
not notice.
The other issue we've always had with various wingers we've had is that they don't seem to score many goals.
Yeah.
Whereas at least now we're signing Apoku, who has come in having scored goals before, and we're signing other players in other positions. We signed Walter off the back of scoring lots of goals. I'm not 100% sold on him, to be honest, but we'll move on to
hmm
midfield talk in a minute. But I think, yeah, now we're bringing in somebody like Apoku who has scored goals. Hopefully means that he'll do that here, because ultimately the days we can get away with a winger scoring 3 goals because your striker will score, 20. If Zambotnik sticks around, perhaps he will.
Yeah.
But we capped ourselves as to where we could get in the table last season by the fact that our wingers didn't
Yeah.
score and didn't really assist either. I mean, what was it? Ronald scored 4 or 5
Most at the
on
start of the
2.
season as well for
Yeah,
Ronaldo. I
and
think
and
it's
indeed
all
for
about
Sunderland.
goal share now. Ultimately, you don't just want your striker scoring 20 goals, because you see it, every team in the league as a 15, 20 goal winger, every team in the league as a 10 goal midfielder, and we just didn't have that last season.
Yeah, I mean, we had the sort of the fabled 20 goal striker, but that was
Yeah,
that was
that
essentially
was
all
it.
we had. We had Zambotnik scored over 40% of our goals last season. I mean, that is
46%, something like that, wasn't it? Crazy.
46%. That's just not sustainable. You
No.
can't have one player scoring that percentage of your goals. It just isn't going to work.
Yeah.
And that's why we were capped at about mid-table, which is obviously where we finished. What do you make of the makeup of the midfield at the moment? And also, I just mentioned Walter there, but the rest of them as well.
I think it's a bit of an awkward one now because we have plenty of options. Of course, Franco is currently still injured, which very unfortunate because I'd argue he is the one the one you want to see the most. I think Stamenic is the obvious one who will go into that hole. I think we have no other player who can do what he can do currently. And I was even pretty impressed with him at the World Cup when I was watching, Eli Just, of course. And then it's an awkward one. You'd imagine we will play Walter. I'm not
Do you?
so... Yeah, I'd say so. I'm not so sold on him, but I can imagine he'll get his sort of chance.
I'm not sure where he fits. I just don't. I don't get the impression Matos is that keen on him. To be honest, the fact that he barely featured last season when he'd have been adapting and wasn't a key member of the squad in pre-season, didn't start against Birmingham. I just don't really get the impression he's that highly rated. I mean, there's people love to point to that impact score stat with the Amal, isn't it? And
I should
fair
have
enough, but
never posted that. I should have never done it.
you have blood on your hands for that one. But I just don't see him as being physically up to it to play in midfield in this league. The only time he's looked, serviceable to me is when he played out wide against Charlton.
Yeah.
And if we see him as a wide option, fine. I think there's more football to be had for him there. But in midfield, I mean, I've seen people suggesting we start him away to Stoke on Saturday. I think he'd get
I wouldn't do that.
completely bullied out the game.
Yeah. I think, and that Charlton game was like a glorified friendly, practically, if we're being honest. Kind of meant nothing.
I kind of want to make this clear because I think people seem to love Walter based on, the fact he scored a lot of goals in Sweden and the fact he can sort of, kick a ball really hard into an empty net in off-season TikTok clips. But
yeah.
I'm slightly taking the mick there. But like, I think there is potentially a player in there. I'm just not necessarily sure he's suited for English football, and especially sort of the rigors of the Championship. It's the same as Yalkue was last season, where you go, I'm not sure he's potentially physically up to it. I'm sure there's a player in there.
Yeah.
And people then blame Matos for not using those
we've
players.
seen that all week.
But if they're not physically up to it, then you can't, unless they go on some mad diet plan and really work hard in the gym, you can't just manufacture that. It kind of isn't really a sort of limitation you can look past in a way at the moment.
Diet
Like, it's not something that can
on
be
the podcast. But yeah, I don't really care how many times he can hit the bar for Finland. I do remember one international break when we did post him hitting the bar for Finland. But regardless, there's quite clearly a player in there. And I do see, personally, I see a world where he gets an opportunity. We spent a good bit of money on him. I can imagine that he probably is going to get a chance at some point because he kind of has to give him one. Whether he takes it or not is another thing. And I do agree with that. I think he's sort of... He's our current, he's the fans' current player who is sort of loved with limited reason. I'd say we always have one.
It was Vidal, but I think people have gone to Valter now. I mean, I would have liked not to have sold Liam Cullen. To be honest, I think if Valter hadn't been an obligation to buy, if we had just loaned him in and it was an option, I don't think we'd have taken up the option on him. I think the fact we had to buy him is basically the only reason why he's here at the moment. And I wouldn't be surprised if he isn't here past, say, January, if I'm honest. I mean, the fact we clearly want to bring in another two sort of advanced eights kind of says to me that him and Vidal aren't rated, because if that was the case, then we'd go with them.
Well, I do find it a bit strange. You mentioned Cullen there, and I know how this is going to turn out, really. This is going to be the sort of clip of the podcast where we're talking about Cullen. A lot of people don't like Cullen. They love Walter, so
it's
not
ridiculous.
The
way people talk about Cullen is absolutely ridiculous.
Walter and Vidal are not better than Liam Cullen. They have not shown me anything that has proved to me they are better than Liam Cullen. Liam Cullen scored more goals than both of them last season. Liam Cullen had more GA in general than them last season. I
scores
don't
goals in big moments.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can see that ultimately, I think it's a brilliant move for Liam Cullen because he's got to go play with Russell Martin, who likes him anyway. And he's gone a leagues down where, to be honest, he will probably look fantastic. I think he will look very good at League One. Because I still think he's a championship player. There's always been this argument that he's a League One level player, but I don't think a League One level player scores, upwards of 10 goals every single season. But yeah, I don't get the discourse around him in comparison to these players simply because they're flashy. They're from, the Danish league, the Swedish league. I think that's the only difference maker between these players is that Liam Cullen's from Wales and the other two have cool flags, pretty much.
I've always been of the belief when it comes to sort of new arrivals and new signings that I need to see it to believe it.
Yeah.
So obviously I did that 1 to 24 article the other day, and I put us in 12th.
Yeah.
Because I need to see it to believe it with a lot of these new signings. Of course, they come in, you're excited, you see their records, their old club, great. But I've seen it with Liam Cullen, and I do believe it. I know exactly what Liam Cullen can offer. And actually, I was watching the Birmingham game on Saturday, thinking Ida keeps dropping deep here. The wingers, in many ways, are the most advanced players on the pitch. What we need is somebody to cut it back to who's brilliant at making late runs into the box. Oh, wait, that's exactly the best part of Liam Cullen's game.
Yeah.
It's like there was basically a Liam Cullen shaped hole on the pitch in the end on Saturday. And I think him and Ida, in the limited football we saw together of them, if we do end up selling Zambotnik, looked really good together. I
Yeah.
just don't. And I don't imagine he'll have pushed for this move. I mean, I'm sure he's happy to join Leicester.
Yeah.
It's his boyhood club. The only reason he's happy to make this move is because he'd essentially been soft replaced by players that I don't think are as good as him.
Yeah.
Which is a bizarre position to be in. I mean, Vidal, for all his, hard work and slight flashes of quality, he got no goals and 1 assist last
Yeah.
season. That's the same as Tom Woodward in his half an hour he came on against Charlton. I mean, you can't have advanced players on the pitch contributing that little in terms of output.
And I think with Vidal, regardless, he missed some absolute sitters. When he played on that wing, he cut inside. I remember the prime example was Sheffield United. Yeah, he cut inside. Brilliant.
He had it cleared off the line brilliantly. Bless him. Yeah.
But he's one of those.
He also
players...
nearly scored about 5 minutes into the new season, which I thought against Birmingham, which I was like, I'd be so typical if he failed to score for an entire season and then 5 minutes in he finally gets it.
I think he hasn't got that same sort of. You described Walter. You said you can imagine him never making it in this league. I can imagine Vidal making it in this league because I think he has got a lot of qualities and he has shown a lot of flashes. And in many ways, he was pretty unlucky last season. But eventually, the coin sort of has to drop. I think I've said it quite a bit where I think I've never looked at him and thought, wow, you've been the best player on the pitch. But I have looked at him and thought you have been the worst player on the pitch, which is a bit worrying in many ways.
It's quite harsh potentially as well, I think. I don't think he was ever the worst player on the pitch for us, but
I don't know, I think there are a few games.
I just don't necessarily see an advanced player because there was nothing in his data really that said he should have had way more goals and way more assists. I mean, his expected goals was just over 1. His expected assists was just over 2. If he had 1 goal and 2 assists last season, for the amount of football he played, which actually was quite a bit in the end, and the positions he was playing, you'd still go.
You'd have the same conversation. Is it? Yeah.
Yeah, I think you would. I think you would still have the same conversation. And I can see why we're trying to bring in another midfielder. I think another 2 is completely crazy. I think you end up basically, if people are desperate to see Walter and Waddell more, which, perhaps there is a legitimate argument for both of them. I'm not necessarily sure I see it, but I don't want to write them off completely. If you bring in 2 more midfielders, you are writing them off completely.
Yeah. And I think we need to stop this constant squad turnover. I'm going to be honest, because we posted that thing the other day from, the double-double only 3 years ago. Yeah, there's only 3 players that remain, which is absolutely mental. In what world that squad was, just about away from the playoffs. Probably a wing back and a
right back. Away,
away from the playoffs, right? And you look 3 years down the line, and obviously football does move a lot quicker now than it used to. But three players remaining, and if you look at the squads since then, I bet a lot of those have had major turnover too. I think it gets to the point now we need to stop signing 10 midfielders, 8 wingers. We need to just get down what we actually want to do and stick with it, to be honest.
Because the argument to always signing players from abroad is you give them a season to adapt. You say the first season isn't necessarily going to be perfect. The second season, you'll see a lot more from them. Case in point, Zambotnik last season.
Yeah.
His first season, there were flashes. You could see he could kick a ball really hard, which is ultimately probably the best aspect of his game. And you go, yeah, I've seen enough. I mean, I wasn't massively
We
convinced by him,
both
but
wrote him off on the podcast, didn't we?
yeah,
But
we did. Yeah,
yeah,
I wasn't convinced, but you go, you've seen enough. And I mean, the club clearly weren't convinced either. Otherwise, they wouldn't have spent 7 million on Adam either.
well,
But
look, we've taken a
that's
lot
a
of
side
flack.
point.
We've taken a lot of flack for that, and it's pretty irrelevant. But in
Yeah.
what world did anyone think he was going to be
But
the top scorer?
no, exactly. But you can't just completely write off these players after one season. Otherwise, this is complete. Like, we looked at spending 2 million quid on full sec, who obviously that doesn't sound like it's going to happen now. He started one game for a team in Denmark last season. 3 years ago, 2 million quid was our marquee signing of the summer. And it's like we're just throwing these huge sums of money around on players who will either be replaced after 6 months or will basically never play. I asked Orange in the forum if all this is sustainable. He said yes. The fact we're seemingly entertaining offers that I'm not convinced by for Zambotnik does make me slightly question that, dare I say?
Yeah, and I think, they're very lucky in many ways now that we can just kind of throw these ridiculous sums at players. Because obviously we have got a lot more money than we previously had, at
And all
least our
championship
owners
clubs
do.
have more wiggle room
Yeah,
because of the
mhm.
squad cost ratio.
But it's interesting because we sort of have this blanket of Jamestown analytics now. Whenever we're about to make a sign-in, people are like, well, it's Jamestown, it's data. That doesn't make a difference. Sometimes
I think we've done too much this summer.
yeah, we don't,
I think
go on.
we've got a bit excited about the
Yeah.
fact we have access to this data and have done too much. I really do think that's what it is. I mean, Matos literally said after the final game of the season in the press conference, we don't want to, evolution, not revolution, basically. I'm paraphrasing here. A couple of players, we don't look too far away, bring in 4 or 5, bit more depth, bit more quality. Great. We're probably going to sign 8 or 9 players by the end of this window. I don't think we needed to do that.
No, I agree. We've sort of blown it all up once again, haven't we, in many ways. Now, this might seem a bit of a, an over exaggeration of it, but it's really not, because you think at the start of the season, we're going to have 2 new wingers, which we should have. Potentially,
and that was 2 of the positions we needed.
Potentially a massively different midfield if they are genuinely looking at signing 2 new midfielders, which it does look like. We have been in for Almeida and Sek at the same time. It's strange. It is
and
strange.
a bloke from Strasbourg was linked there. I can't remember his name, but apparently that's one we've already missed out on. That one won't happen by the sounds of things.
Yeah, it's a strange situation. I think as I said, they can get away with a lot more in terms of looking at these players, because everybody on Twitter, the whole discourse will ultimately just be, well, you gotta trust them because it's Jamestown, it's data, but it's not.
And people love flashy new signings.
Yeah. People love the signings from abroad too, and that is all we are going to sign now. Like, don't get me wrong, like I've definitely been a victim of it before, but you see a cool flag, you see people just want to take a Finnish flag
You're
away
obsessed with
sometimes.
cool flags, aren't you?
Because it's my theory in it, the cool flag theory. People see a Finnish flag, and even if a Welsh player isn't better than them, even if a Welsh player is better than them, they will prefer the Finnish player simply because he is Finnish. Yeah, that's just the reality.
He's not Finnish. He's 24.
I knew you were gonna do it. That's so obvious. But
sitting on that one.
It's so obvious.
Yeah, it's the best talk sports segment ever, I think.
Yeah, brilliant, man.
To say. I suppose we should probably wrap this episode up by talking about Stoke on Saturday, our first game of the season. What do you reckon that's gonna happen there? And also look forward to facing a sort of familiar foe now, isn't it, in terms of the man who left the club this summer?
Yeah, Galbraith, a good sign-in, especially to fill in at right back for them, of course.
It's always good to add a bit more depth at right back, innit?
Yeah.
What I did notice, I was doing, obviously when I did that 124 piece that did make me laugh quite a bit, is he is going to have to play right back at some point this season. I mean, basically the reason he left here is because he doesn't want to play right back. He will absolutely end up playing right back at some point.
Of course he will. He'll be doing it for the rest of his career now. When a team finds out you're a solid right back, a lot of people were. I've seen it the discuss a lot this week about Yalkue, and that comparatively they've talked about how Galbraith was played at right back and he was ridiculous, all this, but every team he signs for the rest of his life, he will play right back at some point.
He will play at least one game at right back. Yeah.
Absolutely. But regardless, I think
Stoke was so bizarre though.
Yeah, same. I just don't get it. I mean, obviously they've got, they can chuck a lot of money about, but he looks like potentially they are only good signing. Really, I don't think they've made too much good business. To be honest, I don't know what you think of their business.
I like Svante Ingolson from Sheffield
Hmm.
Wednesday. They brought in Sumare, who was on loan at Sheffield United last season, who I saw next to nothing from him. They brought in Smith up front for
Yeah,
£5 million as part of a bit of a Volta situation, an obligation to buy. He showed absolutely nothing for them last season, so I think they're already looking at trying to get another striker in. I mean, they've got Sorba Thomas, who I really like. He's also
yeah.
really, really lazy when the chips are down. Of which, Luke, what did Luke Williams call it? I think he called him the laziest player he's ever seen in a fans forum
Did
once.
he?
Yeah, because there was a goal he scored against Huddersfield where he literally that when we beat Huddersfield 4-1, one of the goals, genuinely, I've never seen someone walking so much in my life. I mean, I like Manhoof on the wing.
Yeah,
He's a good winger. I
he's
don't think
been around
he's
for a
ever
long
reached the
time now in
level.
this league, hasn't he?
He's not ever reached the level I don't think anyone
No.
really expected him to. And they lost Mabama up front, who's off to Southampton, who I don't think was brilliant for them, but he wouldn't have got that Southampton move if he was terrible.
Yeah,
So I really don't think much of this Stoke team, but I also just don't see us winning there. It's just
we.
there's a certain
Yeah,
vibe of ground that we just never win at.
I always look at Stoke. I've been there 3 times, right, and I've never seen a win,
My
right,
fourth trip.
from the Premier League down to rainy nights in the Championship to a Saturday in the Championship, and I've never seen us win there. It's one ground where you look at even in games where I think we should have won at Stoke. Really, we haven't, and it just so
One
happens
win
that
in
the
20
only
years, isn't it?
and he was in lockdown. It was,
No, I think
was
we.
it? Yeah, are you? When are
Yeah,
you
it
down for?
was.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
unbelievable. The only time we've ever won there in 20 years is when no fan was in the ground.
yeah.
Unbelievable.
It's just not one of those places I ever
No,
expect us to go and get anything.
no.
So we'll see, but I'm not feeling particularly confident. Even though I mean, Mark Robbins as well feels pretty on the brink. I'm quite surprised he's still there, to be honest, given he finished 17th last season with them. I thought, they're ever ambitious, Stoke, aren't they?
Hmm.
Usually it's finish
Yeah,
17th, rinse and repeat.
yeah.
Um, and he's kind of his reputation's really fallen. I mean, I think it might be time to accept that he's not quite as good of a manager as we all thought he was, isn't he?
Yeah. And I mean, he's a very interesting fella, isn't he? Because when we got to sit in on one of his press conferences when we played Stoke
Of
last
course we
season,
did, yeah.
and it was quite an unsettling atmosphere because, of course, like straight afterwards, Vito Matos came in, shaking everyone's hand, smiling. Of course, he just won the match, but
I was just saying, you just lost the
it looked
game in
it
fairness.
looked like Mark Robbins wanted to jump over the table and kill someone.
Yeah, he didn't look very impressed, did he? I mean, his
No,
team had just lost. He'd been on the end of a questionable refereeing decision,
yeah, that red
but
card.
yeah, he wasn't exactly, the most uplifting. I can't imagine
Hmm.
can't imagine he gives the most inspiring team talks in the world, if I'm honest. But
Yeah,
he obviously a lot of the work is complemented to his former assistant AD Viviash, who's obviously now with Kim Hellberg at Stoke, and you can kind of trace the decline of Mark Robbins to when Viviash and him, I think, fell out.
yeah.
So that kind of makes me think he'll be on his way out of Stoke soon, and they're going to appoint Steve Cooper, aren't they? Because I can't believe Steve Cooper hasn't managed Stoke yet.
Yeah, they do seem a match made in heaven. I mean, our only win in 20 years came when Steve Cooper was our manager. So there you go.
Yeah, he will be when Stoke come down here later in the season.
He'll be there.
Mark my words, Steve Cooper will be in the dugout.
We'll wait on that. We'll wait on that for sure. What would you
Um,
play as your midfield three? Because we did talk about the midfield three, but I don't think we ever gave a clear answer. We sort of just divulged into we shouldn't have sold Cullen. So what would be your starting midfield
I can
three
divulge
be?
back into we shouldn't have sold Cullen if you want me
No,
to.
no, no. We don't
No,
know more of that.
yeah, I definitely go with Stamenic. I think I think he'll probably play the vast majority of our games this season. I definitely go with Eli Just as the most advanced midfielder. And then to give us a bit more bite and a bit more physicality, I don't know if everyone will agree, but I'd go with Jay Fulton. And
Yeah,
I mean, if you told me, I think he might well start. But I think if you told me when Russ basically froze him out over 5 years ago now that he'd still be starting for us on opening day in 2026, I'd have been shocked. But I think that's testament to a man who is nowhere near as respected as he should be by Swans fans.
absolutely. I mean, an undeniable cult hero at this point. He's so many appearances for us over so many years under so many managers playing so many different roles. Like this man is,
Yeah.
this man is unbreakable. Like I just don't know when he will leave, to be honest.
No, exactly, and I don't want him to either. I'm
No.
so glad we gave him that new 2-year contract. There was a couple of years ago where I thought, oh, he's taken a
Yeah.
really big backward step. Actually, he's recovered things really well, and I think last
Yeah.
season, especially in the early days of Matos, looked really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
And I would always think certain games that Fulton will be quite heavily involved. We sign
Yeah.
all these midfielders,
Fulton
we
will
try to
always be
move
there.
on from him, and he
Yeah,
will always
he's
have a
he's not flashy. He's nothing unique, special, but he is that player that just for some reason we can never evade. And I mean, I'm happy we haven't.
Yeah, I'd be more than happy to see him on Saturday. I'd feel a lot more confident if he was in the team, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
One final thing, got to ask you, where are we finishing this season?
Yeah, I really enjoyed reading the article that we posted the other day regarding should we lower our expectations. Now
79% of Swans fans think we're going to finish in the top 8 this season. Just want to point that out. Carry on.
which is very interesting. I don't know. I don't know if we will finish in that top 8. I think we have a very good chance. I think if we start the season well, if we can build on these signings, but I don't know. I think we could end up about 10th.
12th, I think.
Yeah.
That's where I've got us. And we will be back soon with our next episode, I'm sure, where hopefully we'll be proven very wrong on many of the things we've said in this episode. Volta will be a revelation. Vidal will suddenly start scoring for fun.
Score about 20 already. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll be top of the league. And we won't have needed extra bite and physicality in midfield because we'll have simply played through Stoke.
Yeah, fingers
and
crossed.
Ethan Galbraith will hopefully start a right back as well.
Yeah, and hopefully he won't be on the pitch for very long either. But yeah, as always, we appreciate you for watching, and we'll see you all in a bit. Bye.